Hi, everybody. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Today, I have a very special episode that's two parts. One is I wanted to share with you why I created story crafting. But secondly, I'm going to share my story. The two weave together because one is that we want ladies to help find their voice and their power after a cancer diagnosis using this amazing story crafting program. But in that process, I also found my voice, and I can't wait to share my story with you today called Salt. Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? Welcome to the Still I Rise podcast. This is your host, Lisa McKenzie, and today I am sitting here solo. I really prefer having guests on the program with me. It is so fun to sit down and hear all the great things that everybody's doing and listen to their inspirational stories. But every so often, I want to jump in just to kind of give you a little perspective so that you can continue to learn and grow with us as we make an impact. Now, today, I wanted to come on and talk to you about story crafting. Every single episode, I would say almost every episode, you have heard the word story crafting because the majority of the guests have gone through that program that I created and they read their stories. And I wanted to just give you a little background about how the program came to be and one of the stories that I just finished called Salt. Now, way back in 2020 with the pandemic, we were faced doing live events where, like everybody else, the world was shut down and we had to come up with a pivot. I think in 2020 and 21, I must have attended so many online master classes where the subject matter for business owners was, how do you pivot? Because we had to get really creative during that time to continue to reach our audiences and to help people. In my situation, it was helping those who are battling cancer. And how do you do that when you're stuck at home or where all of a sudden a business that is known for its very large live events has to make a big change? So prior to COVID, we have been around since 2013, and we produce a magazine called Ribbons. And in that magazine, we have stories of all the ladies who go through the program. And for the first, 7 years from 2013 to 2020, I don't know how many, you would say 400 ladies, we would say, tell us your story. You have to turn it in by this deadline. And I will tell you, every single story was identical. It would say something like, I'll never forget the day I was told I have cancer, and this is how many surgeries I had, and the radiation, and my friends and family were there for me. The end. And I would sit there looking at these ladies and saying, okay, yes, we want to hear that story and understand what you've been through, but why are you leaving out everything else about you? Everything that gave you the fight necessary to beat cancer, to fight cancer, to go through all those treatments. I mean, there's a life story that brought you to the point of having the strength that you have, or just the other parts of your stories. Like I would hear ladies saying, yeah, I raise alpacas, or I jumped out of airplanes. I used to work for Mick Jagger. I run a thriving business. I have 13 grandchildren. I never heard that side of the story. It was always just about the cancer. And therefore, cancer became the woman's identity. And that always kind of, bothered me a little, but I didn't really quite know how to guide the ladies into sharing more. So along comes COVID, like I said, and we had a live event planned at this beautiful theater in Metairie, Louisiana, Jefferson Performing Arts Center. And for the entire year, I will say from January, this is 2021, from January 21 through the time that we had our event, we, like everybody else, were glued to the, television and just listening, hoping that our governor would come on the news and make an announcement and say, okay, we're lifting certain restrictions. First it was 2 weeks to slow the spread, and then another month and another month. And then it would go, okay, we're going to let you have more people. And then, maybe COVID would spread. So they'd say, okay, we're going to have you less people at the event. You have to stay 6 feet away from each other. You have to wear masks. I mean, all the things that we were dealing with. So as we got closer to our live event, and keep in mind, we do a runway show and celebration where the ladies get together and they do all kinds of, neat things together to create this bond with one another. And one of the things they do is runway training. It's a way for them to start identifying as something other than a cancer survivor. I mean, as a cancer survivor, you might look at yourself and say, I'm not worthy of getting on that stage. I don't feel good about myself. This is not something I want to project right now with no hair, no eyelashes, weight gain, whatever it might be. The scars from surgery, or when they'd go to try on gowns, the gowns didn't fit right anymore because of the construction, or maybe they just had one breast reconstructed. And, there was all sorts of physical issues that the ladies were dealing with. And then, of course, the mental issues of them just believing that they deserved on that stage, regardless of where they were at that phase of their life. So as we started leading up to the event and we realized, wow, these ladies are not going to have the benefit of having a live audience. There were only going to be able to be a few people in the audience because the governor just never came along and said, okay, everything's back to normal. We had to just have a small number of people in that building. And a lot of those numbers were the ladies themselves who were on the runway, our team, the people who were running the facility. It was really, really tough. So we told the ladies, hey, we have good news and bad news. The bad news is, or the good news is that we just got notice that we can have some guests in the building. But the bad news is that it's only 2 per person. I mean, keep in mind, some of these ladies would have, when it wasn't COVID, 30 family members and friends cheering them on. And now they are having to decide which 2 guests come to this event. That means they have to narrow down loved ones, especially if you have a big extended family, children and, I don't know. I mean, it was tough. I mean, I was sad for them, but we really had our hands tied. So, one night I was taking mastermind classes, trying to figure out what can we do to pivot, as I mentioned earlier. And I was laying in bed and, I love those moments where you shoot out of bed and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got it. Like the wisdom or the idea just comes to you. You can't jump up fast enough to get your pad of paper out to start writing down the idea. And the idea that came to me was, what if we bring in a camera crew and we record all the runway, but we live stream it. I mean, kind of a fake live stream. And it was pre-recorded, but we edit it out and then we create an event, and everybody who was stuck at home could tune in over the course of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and watch little bits and pieces of the runway interspersed with sponsor interviews and the ladies' interviews. And that's when it sort of came to be that we said, well, wait a second, what if 50 ladies are telling the same story? Will people tune in? Will that be something that people will want to watch? And, how can we make it just a little bit more interesting to really showcase who these ladies are and what their personalities are all about? So I hired this amazing team, Dan and Stacy Levins, and they worked with me on designing this story crafting program. And the program is a 6-week online group experience where it is metaphor driven. So instead of just saying, here's the trauma that I want to talk about. Now, we'll use cancer as the example, okay? I was diagnosed with cancer, it would be the words. But what is the metaphor you can assign to the feeling and the emotions you had when you heard the words you have cancer, or when you, struggled through all the fights that you had to endure during that journey of fighting? So we would challenge our ladies to say, okay, if you had to assign a metaphor, and there are so many, you could say like the phoenix rising from the ashes. You could say like a garden where, it started getting so filled with weeds and overgrown that they no longer can see the beauty that once existed, and you had to go in and pull out the roots of those strong, stubborn weeds. Those are examples of the metaphors they could assign to the way they were feeling. And then we asked them, hey, go back in time before the trauma even existed and tell us about your life. Who were your influences? Who were your mentors? Where did you grow up? What did you like to do? What were your hobbies? What shaped you into the woman you are today? And then tell us about the day life changed, when you were diagnosed or when the traumatic life experience happened. And then what did you learn from it? All of a sudden, these amazing, beautiful stories were brought to life that really were so interesting to listen to, but everybody's personalities came out in these stories. So that's how story crafting was born. We got to sit down, pre-record the stories, let them tell their story, and then we'd feature them on the runway, all pre-recorded, streamed into everybody's homes. And the statistics for that weekend, I kind of remember seeing it was something like 30,000 people watched over the course of that weekend. It was really crazy, but it was beautiful, and that was the origin of story crafting. So the Still I Rise podcast was the next step of that, where now we've got all these beautiful stories. How can we preserve them and share them to the world? And so last year I launched the Still I Rise podcast, and have been so happy and blessed to be able to share all these stories, where I get to sit down with the ladies every year and record their stories and interview them and bring those to you. Now, in that process, I participated in story crafting myself. And if you go through past episodes, you can hear two of my stories. The first one I wrote was called the Cinderella Story, and that was focused on the feeling of always anticipating a shoe to drop. When everything was going good in your life, the shoe would drop. And so I tackled that feeling by writing about a Cinderella story. So if you have a chance, please go through the past episodes and listen to that one. Then I was able to write this beautiful story called Giants. Now that one was so amazing and life-changing, because when I was writing it, I was setting out to talk about just my life in general, of how I felt like David versus Goliath, that I was so small, but I was equipped by God and I could slay the giants. And as I was writing the story over the 6-week course, and I was participating alongside the ladies in the program, at the very end, I changed the entire story, because again, in the middle of the night, I woke up and I went, oh my gosh, I've got it. It just hit me. And what Giants is about was that I befriended the giants. They were scary, but then I made peace with them. So I really, really would love for you to also listen to Giants. But fast forward, the third story, which I am now about to share with you, called Salt. Now, let me tell you why it's called Salt. I remember, as a new single woman, and my kids were off at school and I was an empty nester. And, I really do think social media can be sometimes, it's a great place. It's how our business runs. I mean, we connect with all of our ladies through Facebook and Instagram, so it's kind of hard to get away from it. There's good and bad. The bad for me is that when you see those quote unquote Instagram stories of everybody's lives, it really can give you that feeling of FOMO, right? The fear of missing out, where you are looking at all these amazing family get-togethers. I mean, huge get-togethers, and having this sad feeling where I wish that was me. Because when my marriage dissolved, my family split up, and this close, beautiful family, an extended family through my husband, was fractured. And it was very, very, very difficult for me. So I was always trying to figure out, like, well, how do I write this story to talk about the fact that I am looking back at what I once had and was longing for that. And, I sat on that thought for some time. My daughter came home from college, and we went to church here in Covington, Louisiana, St. Timothy's Church. And just kind of a side note, the church I go to there, the service is called 1111. That's my number. I don't know if you guys are numbers people, but I see 11s all the time. I mean, often it's 1111, 111, but I also see 211, 911, 3. And whenever I see those, I always kind of look up. I'm like, okay, thank you, God. It's kind of like I always look at it like a God wink. But we go to this service called 1111. And I'm not going to lie, we sit down, and when the pastor came in, she was a guest pastor. And I remember being sort of disappointed that she was there because she wasn't the pastor I was used to seeing. I think she was substituting. And I remember telling my daughter, oh, should we just leave? Like, we were going to go to the other service, which is more of like a traditional service. The 1111 is kind of more contemporary and more of a smaller audience. And my daughter's like, no, let's stay. So we sit down, and the pastor, I think her name is Candy, she starts sharing the story. She goes, I'm going to talk to you today about a woman in the Bible who didn't have a name. She was purely just known as Lot's wife. And she went on to proceed to tell the story about how when God commanded Lot and his wife and his family to leave Sodom, and he said, take only what serves you and don't look back. Otherwise, you're going to be calcified and turned to stone, turned to salt. So I couldn't believe I was hearing that story, because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's exactly what I'm going through. I just never really figured out how I wanted to share it. And so afterwards, I went up and I said, hey, you mentioned a couple Bible verses. Do you mind if I get those? And she just hands me her entire notes, her entire sermon with all her handwritten scribbles next to it. I couldn't believe it. I walked away. I mean, I almost left that service. It was life-changing. So, Candy, if you're listening, I want to say thank you so much for delivering what was truly a life-changing, life-saving sermon that day. So I'm going to read you right now my story called Salt. I would love to hear what you have to say about it, and I hope you like it. So here it goes. Salt. She sat across him at dinner, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of the water glass. The restaurant was quiet, dimly lit, meant for intimacy, though no intimacy remained between them. She had asked him to go to counseling. She suggested a retreat, anything to try to salvage what was left of their marriage, but he brushed it off. I'm not sitting with a bunch of strangers complaining about their marriages and my marriage, he said. So here they were, just the two of them, at a table built for truth or endings. Well, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this marriage work, she said, summoning the courage she didn't feel. I just need to know you're willing to do the same. He didn't hesitate, and he looked at her and said, I don't know if you're worth it. There it was. Words that should never be said. Words that should never be heard. Words that don't just land, they lodge. Words that calcify. She couldn't breathe. not really. And yet somehow she made it through dinner, through the night, and then through the thousands of small deaths that followed. The first man to leave her was her father. She was still a girl when he walked out of the house and into a new life, with a new woman, a younger woman. Her mother shrank under the weight of it. Lisa, too, grew smaller inside, like her soul learned to duck and hide from an early age. She thought when she met her husband that God was making things right. He was kind. He was a Christian. He was devoted, or so she believed. His family welcomed her in like long-lost kin. Finally, she exhaled. Finally, she thought, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is where I'm safe. This is where I'm chosen. She had no idea that the deception was already underway. The affair, years long. The betrayal, deep. The aftermath, unforgiving. But even in the wake of the truth, she tried for the children, for the hope that maybe love could still be resurrected. But that one sentence put it all to rest. I don't know if you're worth it. Worth. She rolled that word around in her mind like a stone, sharp-edged and smooth from repetition. For weeks, for years, she believed it, that she wasn't worth it, that maybe all the leaving in her life had one common denominator, her. But then, light. It came in as whispers at first, in quiet moments when scripture floated in the surface of her mind, like breath bubbles rising from the deep. Promises, truth, identity. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. I will never leave you nor forsake you. You are mine. She started to believe it, slowly, painfully. She fought to change the channel in her mind, to interrupt the cruel loop that kept replaying his voice and those words. She took every lie captive and drowned it in truth. But still, there were ghosts. She missed his family like she missed a limb, birthday calls that stopped, Christmas cards that no longer came, people who once cheered her on now acted as though she never existed. That somehow was the cruelest cut of all, the vanishing of people who had once called her daughter, sister, friend. And then came the sermon. She sat in the church on Sunday. The pastor began to speak of Lot's wife, an unnamed woman told to flee destruction, to take only what served her and to never look back. She turned to look, the pastor said, and was turned into a pillar of salt. Salt. The word clung to Lisa, not just because it was the title of the sermon or the fate of the woman who disobeyed, but because she felt it in her bones, hardened, preserved in sorrow, crystallized by that gaze backward. She wasn't named, the pastor continued. She's just called Lot's wife. Well, isn't that how so many women feel when they are left? Like their identity is swallowed whole by someone else's choices? Lisa wept, because that was her. Known only by proximity, a daughter abandoned, a wife discarded, a ghost in a family photo that someone else got to keep. But then came the change. Take only what serves you. Not the pain, not the shame, not the echo of someone else's failure projected onto her worth. Don't look back, the pastor said, or you'll get stuck. You'll turn to stone, to salt, preserved in a past that cannot be revived. Lisa made a choice. She would not be salt. She would be water, living, flowing, full of spirit and motion. She would be fire, refining, not consuming. She would be wind, carrying truth where it was needed most. She would be a daughter again of a father who never leaves. Healing didn't come all at once, because it never does. But she stopped begging people to stay. She stopped trying to earn worthiness from those who couldn't see her value. And she stopped looking back at a life that no longer served her, no matter how pretty it looked in the rearview mirror. The salt in her tears had not been wasted. They watered the soil of something new, something holy, something rising. She was not abandoned. No, she was becoming. My friends, that is my story. That is my third installment of the story crafting chapters that I've written. I hope that it spoke to you today. I hope you understand why I create the Unite program to help women find their worth. Through it all, it helped me find mine. I am better and stronger and more confident. I feel loved. I know where love comes from, and it is from my Father above. And if you're a single woman going through this, I do invite you also to please join us and listen to my other podcast that was just launched called Darling, You Are So Worth It. But until then, thank you so much for joining me today to listen to my story, and contact me. I want to hear yours. God bless you and have a great day. We invite you to join us next week for a very special episode of the Still I Rise podcast, where I am bringing together two very special people in my life. We're sitting down with an amazing couple whose journey through 5 cancer diagnoses has not only tested their strength, but has transformed their lives. He's a dedicated caregiver, mentor, board member, and one of our biggest supporters, and has become a dear friend. She's a warrior, a 5-time survivor, and a shining light in our sisterhood. Together, they represent both sides of the cancer journey and how love, community, and faith can fuel a purpose far greater than the pain. Get ready for a heartfelt, eye-opening conversation that will inspire caregivers, survivors, and anyone who's walked beside someone they love through life's hardest battles. See you next week on the Still I Rise podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in today and listening to the story. Please do us a favor, click the subscribe button and consider a donation. Did you know just for $3 a month, you will be supporting such a huge project where we can get the stories and the voices of these amazing survivors out to the world so that others can find hope, information, and inspiration. Your support means the world to us, and also the fact that you're here today means everything to us. Have a beautiful day.